But we've got a cracking session to start with you. Talking all about the challenges here in Coventry, the City of Culture, and we have a session about some of the challenges around transportation and how a large local authority starts its pathway to net zero. So please welcome on stage John Seddon, Head of Transport and Innovation at Coventry City Council. John, thank you very much. A long journey or not?
Glad to be here. Well, it's been a long journey for the council, that's for sure. And certainly over the past few years, we've noticed a real difference in how councillors in particular have sort of perceived the challenges of climate change. The really good thing about working at Coventry is we've got a good set of cabinet members, and it's not often I can say that necessarily about our political leaders, but they do actually get it in terms of climate change. They do get the challenges of how we decarbonise our transport network, which is a significant challenge. And they're willing to gamble. And one of the exciting things, my role at Coventry as Head of Transport and Innovation, I don't come across too many colleagues across the country who have innovation in their title when it comes to transport. Some of the projects that we're involved with, when it comes to something minor about helping our residents overcome barriers to EV ownership, those residents on our Victorian streets with no access to their own car parking, in past authorities where we've worked, and authorities where I know there's sort of colleagues working hard to decarbonise the network. When it comes to taking advantage of government funding to put in charge points on street situations, we always come across the thing of, well, we can't restrict car parking for other residents. We can't allocate car parking where we can't afford to tackle the parking pressures on this street. But our politicians are saying, actually, we need to electrify. We need to give people the chance to charge at home. And if they've got on-street parking outside their door, we need to get charge points out there. So they've been supporting us, putting funding bids in, putting charge points in. We've got the biggest network of public charge points in the city outside London. So we've got more than 400 now. So it's kind of that sort of political will to say, we're going to do this, even though there are challenges to it from local residents. That's at one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum, our public transport network. Working with the combined authority, who are our strategic transport authority in Coventry, to deliver basically a fully electric bus network in Coventry. And that political support to say, yes, this is important, we need to do this. We'll work with the bus companies, we'll work with Warwickshire, combined authority, get the bids in, secure the funding from DFT, we'll just crack on. We'll give up car parking space to make sure there's additional charging space for the buses. Politicians willing to take that sort of decision. And then, the key thing, looking at, do we do tramways, do we do bus rapid transit across the city as part of our future transport network? Again, our politician a number of years ago saying, actually, we want to design our own system which is suitable for Coventry, suitable for our tighter, twisty streets. We can't do conventional tram. We've all seen the problems with Birmingham, Edinburgh and so on about delivering a conventional tram system, digging down. Let's do something lightweight. Let's do something which is no carbon, so battery powered, smaller vehicles, but that can take 50 or 60 people. Nothing out there on the market for that at the moment, so let's go and design one. So working with the University of Warwick, working with manufacturers, working with other colleagues across the region, put a partnership together, secure funding for R&D, so we've secured 15 million so far for it. We've got a prototype vehicle ready to test. So one of the key things, one of the exciting things about working here is our politicians are willing to do that sort of thing. So it's not just senior officers like myself, the directors and so on, having these ideas and saying, let's try it out. It's actually the politicians saying, yes, we'll back you on that. There might be a bit of flack from the press or whatever when we first suggest it. But, we'll do that, So, I think, one of the key messages I would say from Coventry's experience is if you see funding opportunities, if you can find some kind of angle for that funding opportunity to help you and your local authority, decarbonise your network, then go for it. We secured funding from our colleagues at Highways England from their discretionary pots to basically buy 70 electric vans from our fleet. The case for it, business case for it, was a bit challenging to put together because it had to relate to the trunk road network from Highways England's point of view. But we saw an opportunity, we went for it. We've got those 70 vehicles coming into our fleet now, in use for our day-to-day business and part of our, reducing our carbon footprint as Coventry City Council. But also, we're making those vehicles available for our local businesses. So if you're, a plumber or an electrician operating in Coventry and you want to, you want to go electric, but you're not sure how to work for you, you can borrow one of our vehicles for 2 or 3 months. Try it out, see how it works for you, and then hopefully we'll encourage those people ultimately to go electric fully. So it's, there are challenges. The taxi industry is more challenging. Even though we've got LEVC in this sort of city, sort of making electric taxis. We've got Dynamo making electric taxis. Yeah. We've got those vehicles as well on loan for our local taxi drivers, for them to use. But the economics of the taxi market are a bit more challenging, we're finding that. But it's trying to make that connection between businesses who might not have the capital or the option to try out electric, to go fully electric, and giving them the opportunity to try it out and see the benefits. So that's the sort of thing that we're doing in Coventry.
When it comes to, our audience at home, there's lots of people who are from local authorities, I know that, and probably there's a few here today. I suppose the big challenge we always find when we talk to local authority people is there's a willing desire to be the facilitator to do it. But they're always fighting the budgetary side, and as you said, the political side. I think, in general terms, we're all here. Politically, there's a will in this country to go net zero. There's a political will that's happening. Businesses have a will to do it, otherwise none of these people would be here. So I think that's probably changing. But in terms of that funding one, how do you drill down in difficult times with the pandemic, what's happened, local authorities under more and more pressure? How do you go about saying, actually, to local authorities out there, this is how you would start to try and find the funding for those exciting projects that can lead to these things?
I think for a lot of it is building good partnerships with the supply network, supply chain. For the electric taxis, we've got some initial air quality grant funding that we could use because we've got air quality issues in the city. And we worked with LEVC to put a package together for our taxi drivers so that they loaned the vehicles basically, and they cut a deal for us on that. And they did deals for taxi drivers wanting them to take up the option. On the on-street residential charge points, again, it was working with the supply chain, the suppliers of the charge points. The tender we put out for the supply and fit of those charge points, we basically, having done a bit of initial market testing, we put a package together that said, okay, we need 25% local funding to secure the government grants. The charge point provider actually stepped up to the plate and provided that 25% funding. So that scheme is actually nil cost to Coventry City Council's own budget, which again makes it easier to get past the politicians, the cabinet member for finance, our finance director and so on. And the deal we've got with the charge point operator is that once usage goes above a certain level, we start to get a share of the revenue that's coming back. So they get to cover their costs. Their contribution is taken from the revenue. But once they start making profits on it, we get a share of that. So it's looking at trying to set those partnerships up and to do those sort of deals. And it is a case also of just having an eye out for those government grants and those opportunities. And it's not just in my case, DFT is the natural route. But it's getting funding from bodies like Innovate UK, Highways England and so on for various sort of projects.
For the businesses here in this room, and there's a lot of this with businesses, that they have been under the cosh massively, as you well know. And we were delighted to say that we launched Future Net Zero last January, and then we did a kind of study in about June. And despite the pandemic, 78% of our audience said we're still committed to net zero, even though there's a financial cost right now. So is there an opportunity for local authorities to see what you've done here in Coventry and work with business? Is there an opportunity for businesses to work with their councils and not just sit there as two separate kind of silos trying to do the same thing?
Yeah, definitely. And it's sort of, part of our rationale, for operating the way we do is to support our local businesses. We work with the bigger businesses as well and our universities. And it's, to be frank, part of our sort of motivation is, the economic development side of things as well.
Of course.
So Coventry has a long history of industry. It's developed, sort of initially from medieval times. It was the wool trade, it was caps, it was ribbons and so on. But it then went into bicycles. Then somebody thought, let's put a motor on this bicycle. Then somebody thought, well, let's put 4 wheels on this bicycle and a motor and make it into a car. And, if you look at the motor trade in the sort of, from the 20s through to 60s, 70s, 80s, Coventry was Motor City. It was the UK's Detroit. And, that's a big challenging mindset to get from sort of that, reliance on internal carbon combustion engine, and actually go to an electric. But, we do have companies based here who are sort of transitioning that sort of older technology, those older skills, and transferring them to electric car production. So LEVC, Dynamo, we've got various bus companies locating here, Rave Industries and so on. So part of it for us is also building those partnerships and actually helping those companies and building a supply chain network around Coventry and the West Midlands and Warwickshire, which brings employment to this area, which means that the kids that are coming through, the students that are coming through, have jobs to go to, which are in a different element of technology, but are very high quality jobs. So that's part of our rationale. And that's where some of the research and development comes in. So we're working on the very light rail vehicle. Yeah. We're working with a local manufacturer on that. It's been sort of designed locally, it's been built locally. And 2/3 of the components were sourced within the UK, and the majority of those within the West Midlands. So it's kind of making sure that we've got something which is sustainable for the city in the long term. And we want to see, when we actually get to the stage where we've got those trams, the very light rail vehicle up and running, we want to see it built in Coventry or the West Midlands. We want to see it local, but we then want to be supplying other towns and cities, other countries with those vehicles. So we're creating a new industry.
Sort of local markets as well.
Exactly. So the whole thing is, we want to decarbonise the transport network, but we also want to make sure that our local economy is boosted along the way and is supported along the way.
We're going to open up for questions in a moment, but one of the things that I suppose where you're sitting is one of the fundamentals. As I said to you earlier before we came on air, I said, my mum's nearly 80, and where she lives in London, they've just changed the bus from a diesel bus, small single-decker bus, to an electric, and what a difference. Now, in reality, it doesn't make a massive load of difference, but the perception is there's not that noise, she doesn't see that. Is transport one of those things where we all know that we've got to do a lot more, the businesses initially have got to do a lot more, but it's one of those key things that we visualise, which was what happened at the beginning of the pandemic, no cars on the road, clearer air, we felt that. Do you see that for councils, for businesses, decarbonising transport is almost like a kind of, it's a symbol that is very easy for the public to relate to?
I think so, and we've had the first 10 electric buses come into operation in Coventry. They came in last August, and we've got a reasonably modern bus fleet in the city. We've got what National Express have termed their platinum services. We've got Stagecoach Gold buses as well coming in. So these are the ones with the posh seats, the Wi-Fi and all that sort of thing. But however good the diesel are, it's still diesel. Things are still vibrating, like the handrails and the seats and so on. So you've always got that background noise, even if it's not quite as noisy as buses in the 1970s or 80s, for example. Going on one of the electric buses, all that vibration, all that background noise has gone. The engine noise is gone. So when we were going around on those buses for the sort of test runs, there were a group of us there, socially distant, so we're 2 or 3 seats apart. On a diesel bus, you'd have to shout to have a conversation.
Yeah, of course.
Even a modern diesel bus, you have to. On the electric bus, we just had normal voice conversation. We were able to have it.
Are those buses in service now for the people?
The first 10 buses are in service.
Right. And what's the reaction been from the public?
It's been very positive. Yeah, I mean, it has been a challenge for National Express because they've obviously launched it when we've had the travel advice and restrictions and various lockdowns. So they haven't been used to their full potential, perhaps. But they're on the busier service. They're on hospital to city centre, then out to the south side of the city. And yeah, it's really positive reaction. And I think when we see people sort of returning to events like this and sort of returning to work and so on, in terms of more office travel, more commuter travel, then I think the advantage of the electric buses is not just that they're better for the environment and they're sort of generally cleaner and attractive, but they will attract people who would historically have thought, actually, I don't want to go on a bus. So people going on these buses, they'll get a totally different experience. It still looks like a bus, it still is a bus. But the
And do you think
quality is so
that
different.
symbolism I talked to is quite positive to say, oh, actually, my town or city is doing something because my buses are electric? People feel that. Yeah. Any questions, ladies and gents? Anyone got any questions? We've got microphones. The way it works is a bit like if you've ever been to a Comic-Con, because of social distancing, we'll put the mic near you and you have to stand up. Anyone got a question for John at all? Over here. So can we get the mic down here? Keep your hands up, please. The two gentlemen, there's one there and one there.
My name's John Thomason of Atmos Innovations near Northampton. The question is, we're sold electric vehicles on the very low running costs from the grid. It's about 16 pence per kilowatt hour. You've talked about your charging network and companies. So what is the cost of electricity from a charging point on one of your Coventry City Council points? Because it could be significantly higher, which could affect the economics.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of our charge points, we've got sort of the trickle charges, which are the ones that are primarily on the residential streets, and I think those are at sort of around the 10p mark, I think, was the sort of deal that was there. But one of the things that we were conscious of is we need to try and keep things consistent across the board. So we do have different providers doing the rapid charges in the city centre, which deliver a faster charge. That is a different supplier to the on-street residential ones, which are the trickle charges. Yeah. But we've ensured in the contracts with them that we've got open access and we've got a common charging regime. But it's one of the problems I think we need to tackle nationally is actually getting a consistent charging regime and to make charging as painless as possible, sort of in terms of not having to have multiple apps on your phone for each different type of charge point. So that's something that we're very keen to promote within Coventry, but obviously we can only influence what's happening within our contracts. We can't influence what's happening, say, at Corley services on the M6, where there'll be Tesla chargers and there'll be electricity chargers. But we try and keep the prices down as much as possible and consistent across the board.
Question here, if you mind standing and
I'll not touch it.
demasking. yes, that's it.
Mike Davis, Clear Cost Energy. Are you having conversations with surrounding towns and cities? Because normally I try and travel by train rather than drive. And I live in Sutton-in-Ashfield, just north of Nottingham. Had a look at using the train. 5.5 hours and 4 changes. Yeah. So I drove. That was the option. Yeah. An hour and 15 minutes. So it's getting everything connected up. That's the next issue. And
it is. And I mean, I was actually born in Nottingham, and so I know the journey well. And we are working with regional partners and the rail industry to try and sort of reinstate, in effect, a service between Coventry and the East Midlands, so Leicester and Nottingham. There was actually a launch event at the end of May from colleagues at Midlands Connect, who are the sub-national transport body, covering Herefordshire all the way up to Lincolnshire. And they have funded sort of work which has identified a good business case for reinstating Coventry, Leicester, Nottingham services. Inevitably, with the rail industry, there's a few infrastructure challenges, so we need to sort of make it easier for services to get across the West Coast Main Line at Nuneaton, for example, as which is not going to be a cheap scheme to sort of do a bypass there. But we are making that case because we're acutely aware, looking at our transport from Coventry. We've got excellent services down to London, excellent services into Birmingham. Obviously, particularly northbound travel, we want to capitalise on HS2 when that does come. But that kind of north-south journey, sort of linking sort of Coventry to Nuneaton and then up to Leicester, or south towards Leamington and then Oxford and the Thames Valley, those services are restricted. So it is, broadly speaking, only an hourly service, and to go to Leicester, you've got to change at Nuneaton. So, it takes more than an hour to basically make that journey, and you're half an hour in a car. So we are working to try and sort that. And, obviously, hopefully we'll take advantage of some of the opportunities from the revamp of the rail industry, which is coming, which government announced last month. It's a case of our role is to help Midlands Connect and colleagues put the big case together. So our council leader has been very vocal in supporting Midlands Connect on that. We're very much lobbying our MPs and ministers on it to sort of keep it as a national issue. But and again, that's the other thing that you do need to keep doing, is keeping the politicians' ear at sort of local level, at minister sort of level. So it's, the more they hear of an issue, the more they'll get fed up with it and tell civil servants to try and sort this out for us. So it's kind of, it is keeping that marketing and campaigning going, as well as doing the technical work. The technical work is part of the battle, but a lot of the battle is actually the working to get the politicians on board at all levels, local level through to regional and national.